Okay, so today we'll be talking about chapter 10. All right, and this is all about leadership, delegation, things along that nature. Okay, leaders, as a leader, you have the ability to either direct or motivate other people and to set different goals for those people. And how you lead and how you operate is going to determine how your people, respond and how they follow through on different things. Because as the nurse, leader, and mentor, you can put a powerful um, motivational direction over people, and it's done through power. So, there's two types of power. Explicit, this would be somebody like Trump. Okay, he's given power by virtue of position. And as you can already see, sometimes when that happens, people don't respect that position because they either feel like you don't deserve that title, or they don't agree with the points that you're presenting to them. So just like you see different things with him and with politics, you might see with your instructors, like how different instructors can control a course or a classroom better than others. Different bosses can control a shift different than others, and you'll feel more confident under certain bosses when they're in charge as opposed to others. And some of that's going to be how they handle the situations on the floor, how they handle you as an employee, and how much respect that you have for them. Sometimes people don't have respect for their bosses, and part of that is because they feel like the boss got the position through something other than hard work, and they feel like they don't know enough about the title or the job to be telling you what to do. So there's various reasons why someone won't like it when someone's in a position of power. But regardless of that, um, you'll still do what they say. Why? Why will you do what that person in the position of power says, even if you don't agree with it and you don't like it?
Insubordination.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be written up for
Yeah.
insubordination, and they're signing your paycheck,
Yep.
right? They're signing off on that paycheck. So if they're giving me my paycheck, then I might want to listen to what they have to say. All right. So I was just trying to pull up the objectives here for you so we can kind of go over those a little bit, so that you know what your objectives are for this particular assignment. So, implied power, this is when we have power due to other factors. So, I was talking the other day and I was saying this can be good or bad. So, like Jim Jones, okay, he's a perfect example of implied power. He had this personality that sucked people in. And because of his personality and the things about his personality, he was actually able to convince people, not one or two people, but a lot of people, to drink something that was going to ultimately kill them. And so, power can have a big factor depending on how it's implied. Because when someone sucks you in with their personality, they can be a little more persuasive than someone with a position just because they've been put there by power. Because, if you don't want to do what your boss says, ultimately, what? You could go find another job somewhere. And sometimes that is a better thing because you find a job that's better, that maybe has a better boss and maybe has some better benefits. And sometimes you jump from the frying pan into the fire. So, but when someone draws you in through their personality, it's hard for people to resist that. Where do we see this happening at on a constant basis right now? Where people draw people in with their personality and their power.
Media. In the media.
Okay, in the media, so like actors and actresses, they can use their powers of persuasiveness to do things. We always want the sports, what's the big thing that people try to put on the athletes? Oh, you have to act a certain way because kids look up to you and our kids are going to do what you say. So we need you to act a certain way because they're going to follow suit behind you. What else? How about catfishing? You know what that is?
No.
Catfishing is when somebody comes into like an internet dating site or something like that, and they persuade the person to be this person that that person wants to fall in love with. So they feed off of what the other person is saying. And as the other person is saying, oh, I like this, I like that, this person feeds into that, and they use those things that that person tells them about themselves to bait them with. And
Oh.
so what'll happen is they'll bait them to the point where they're actually getting money and stuff from them. They're getting, and they do it. You'll see them on like Dr. Phil and all, where they catfish them out of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they're able to do it through this, drawing in of the personality. And by the time the person realizes they've been bamboozled, it's too late. And a lot of these are giving money and stuff to these people. They've never even met them. Like the person isn't even who they say they are. And so, they're giving it to somebody who's not even there because they want, to be attached to someone that has all these perfect qualities. So, learning objectives for this chapter include knowing the qualities, the skills, and the different styles of leaders, knowing the 5 managerial functions, being able to know the difference between leadership and management. And management, really, you're just managing the situation. Like you're over it and you're going to do things to address problems. You'll be problem solving, you'll be staffing, you'll be looking at budget cuts and stuff like that. But when you're a leader, you're more of a mentor and you lead by example, because if you want the best from people, you have to be the best. You can't be a sloppy person who doesn't care, who shows up to work late all the time and doesn't follow certain rules and regulations and then expect your people to do it. And I see people doing this. They'll write somebody up for a policy, but when I ask them, what policy are you writing it up for? They can't even tell me the policy themselves. They don't even know what the policy is. So, how can you write someone up under you for a policy violation if you don't know the policy? Totally not fair, and it should not be a strategy that leaders use. If you want people to follow a policy, then you have to follow it all the time. And if you always follow policy and procedure, which is what I tell people, follow policy and procedure, because in the end, if something goes down and you're following policy, most likely you're not going to really get in trouble. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but most likely if you did everything you're supposed to, you're not going to get in trouble. But when you don't follow policy, then you don't have a leg to stand on. Know the significance of the magnet recognition. Why is it important to have magnet status, and how could that benefit us as not only a facility but as nurses? Be able to summarize the steps in the process of change. So you don't go into a facility and say, "Oh, I'm just going to change this today because I don't like it and I think it needs to be changed. I think my way is better, and this is how we're going to do it." What happens when you try to introduce change like that? And it really doesn't matter how you try to introduce change. When you try to introduce change, what are you going to get?
Resistance.
Resistance, right? Try to implement change with your toddler. What happens?
You better be up for a fight, Miss Sue.
Exactly. Even a 2-year-old is going to resist change, right? So there's ways you have to go about change to slowly integrate it towards people. First of all, you have to get them to buy into the change. If they don't buy into the change, they are not going to change. And even after you get them to buy into the change, it's still going to take them some time to start changing and change those processes. Um, Describe areas in which beginning nurses can develop leaderships. So when you have these nurses, new nurses out on the floor, you want to teach them how to develop their skills and how to get better at doing the things that they need to do when they're out there. And you don't do that by taking the job over. You do that by maybe showing them on a mannequin or something, okay, and then watching them demonstrate it to you, and then maybe go out on the floor and re-demonstrate it with an actual patient. Let them demonstrate it to you back. Don't take over the project. So if you're watching them do it, let them do it. And then at the end, when they're done doing it, or as they're going through it, you show them the things that they could have done differently or better to help improve.
Just one more one. I'll do one strand.
Sorry, my dog just jumped on my computer and knocked me off my page. Okay. Recognize responsibilities associated with delegation. So, what are those? Some of those responsibilities. Well, first of all, you have to know who you're delegating to. Do they have the scope to complete this thing that you've this assignment that you've delegated them to? Do they have the knowledge to do it? Is it a routine thing that you should be delegating to them? Is the patient that you're delegating to them stable? Um, have you evaluated this person to see if they're capable of performing this delegated skill that you're delegating to them? So, and remembering that even though you delegate the task, the assignment or the responsibility belongs to you still. And also knowing that you can never delegate any part of the nursing process. And then what is your role as a mentor? So now you're not the LPN on the floor who is going to the charge nurse. You are the charge nurse on the floor that everyone else is coming to. So, how are you going to make those people respect you? How are you going to get productivity out of them? How are you going to deal with them when they're resistant to change? And how are you going to deal with them when they get in those modes of, I'm not doing what you say. You can't tell me what to do. So how do you make people go about, becoming productive and getting these different things done? Again, I say that personality is way more powerful than position. Because at the end of the day, if you're my boss and I don't want to do what you say, the worst you could do is fire me and I might find another job. But it's really hard to resist when people have you under their thumb by their personality. And you know this if you've ever been in a relationship, especially like your first love. Your first love is the most powerful relationship that you probably will have in your entire life. And even after you break up from that love, you still go back, you still keep going back to those feelings, and even if that person did bad things to you, that's not what you think about. You think about all the good things, all the good times that you have, and that's what keeps drawing you back to that person. And sometimes it's hard to break away. Even years later, you might go down the road and say to yourself, did I make the right move? Because you still have that powerful attraction. So I feel like personality wise is much more powerful than the virtue of position. Tell whether the following statement is true or false. A good example of explicit power is a class bully who gets his way by intimidating his classmates. What do you think?
True.
Okay, I would say that this is probably false. We're going to see what it says, but I would say it's false because you're not appointed into a position of being a bully, right?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Bullies are usually what?
Taking advantage on somebody.
Well, usually a bully is somebody who has low
It's like
self-esteem.
implied. Is it implied?
There's
Oh.
somebody who has low self-esteem that
Yeah.
most likely comes from a home where either the mom or the dad are probably some sort of violent domestic abusers, okay? If not physically, at least verbally, they are probably constantly putting this person down. So they lack self-esteem and they lack
Self-esteem.
confidence, right? Now,
Yeah.
one thing usually about a bully is if you usually face a bully face to face, they'll usually back down because a lot of times that power comes from fear.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they're reaching into their inner fear and they're expressing this power from there. But, my experience has been because I used to have one that bullied me every day. And one day when she wasn't looking and came around the hallway, I just jumped on her and I just started welling with every little direction I could. And you know what? The bully never bothered me again and actually kind of went away like with her tail in between her legs. But I was scared, so I did it because I was tired of being bullied every day for everything. I'm not going to let you keep coming to me like that because I can't go on through life like that, right? So a lot of times
Yeah.
when you face those bullies head on, they back up. They really can't. Their mouth, doesn't match what their actual skills are. But usually there are people that have been intimidated. So now they're trying to employ that same thing on someone else. All right, so that would be implied power. All right, so it's the personality or that intimidation factor that's causing other people to do what he says. So leadership qualities, okay? Leaders need to be charismatic, meaning you have this sort of personality that draws you in. Maybe you're smiling and happy all the time and you're positive, and people like those qualities about you. Dynamic means that you can work well with other people, engage with other people, and together um, you make things happen. Enthusiastic means, you know, that you're full of energy, and it's a positive sort of energy, and you're always up and ready to go. Like you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you're ready to go every day. All right. And you're in this motivational type of go, like this positive type of go. And you're spreading that energy towards other people. They can see it in your gait, in your posture, in the way you walk, in the way you hold your head up, and the way you present your facial expressions. Poised means that you carry yourself with a certain amount of professionalism and an air of confidence, high self-esteem. You think highly about yourself and you feel like you're important and things that you are doing are important. Confidence is really believing that you can, and having that positive energy that no matter what I'm going to do, it's going to turn out good. Does that mean you won't fail? No, because part of being successful is failing. You can't just do something perfect every time and not make mistakes, because we learn from making those mistakes, and those mistakes help to set us in the right direction and actually help to build our confidence. And then a leader is going to be self-directed. So as a self-directed leader, like I don't even really need an alarm clock, because every day my body is and my brain is going to wake me up, and it's going to wake me up in a direction of go. So I get up, I hit the floor, and I'm going. No one has to come in and say, hey, do your homework. Hey, wash these dishes. Hey, make sure these assignments get done today. Make sure the staffing is good. I'm going to make sure when I go in, I know what my job description is. So when I start out in the morning, I know what I have to do when I first get into the job. And I have a pattern. And most of the time, you have this organizational pattern or this time management pattern that you go in and you follow a routine of things that you do. And that helps with your self direction, because you already have it, everything laid out. You're not just walking in and, oh, maybe I'll mosey over here and do this, or I'll mosey over there and do that. No, when you walk into the nurse's station, there's a certain thing that you have to do, right? The first thing you want to do is make sure your emergency equipment's available. Then you're going to make sure that someone knows you're there, and if they need help to call you, right, then you're going to get that list and look at the acuity for the day. Which patients aren't doing that great or need to be checked on right away, and who can wait. So these are things that you self-direct yourself to do as a manager. You're going to be flexible. Why? Well, let's say I have 23 people on the schedule, and the bottom line that I can work with is 20. Okay, 6 people call out. What am I going to do now, nurse? How am I going to make this happen? All right, I got 18 bodies and I need 20. So how am I going to make that happen? Somebody's going to be pissed off at me today, right? Hello?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Why are they going to
right.
be pissed?
They're gonna be
Because of
working
results.
more.
Yeah, they're going to have to do somebody else's job, because what's the
Job.
manager probably going to do? Give the
Split it.
assignments out, double somebody,
it.
then go in the office and get the coffee, right?
Yep.
She has to reward you.
But a good manager is not going to do that. Okay,
No.
good manager will either, now listen, this is what you have to think about as the manager. One, yes, you're going to be flexible, but two, you have to make assignments that make sense. Okay, so if I'm
Correct.
responsible for everybody on the floor, I really can't put myself into a unit doing medications, because that would be dangerous. Why? I'm safe to give the meds, that's not the issue. Why wouldn't I do that if I'm the leader? Right, I can't run the unit if I'm responsible for this one. I can't run the facility, because my
Yeah.
focus has to be on this unit. And people don't always get that. So you have to pull people and move people in a way that's going to best benefit the facility. And it's not always going to be an easy decision because sometimes people are going to be mad at you, but I feel like they'll get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't, I already probably did. But you know, when you give out the assignments, you want to give them in a way that's fair and consistent. So you don't want to just give the easy assignments to the people that are hard to deal with, because that's what they always want, right?
Yes.
They come in with attitude and they act a certain way. Like I had a nurse, you know, that did this to me last week. I'm opening up a COVID unit. Now, in a COVID unit, I only have 4 patients. Okay, I expect the nurse to do a certain amount of things when they're down there. And the nurse wants to give me attitude, and I'm not dealing with attitude. I don't deal with attitude on the floor. So, you know, that nurse isn't being flexible. I still have to be flexible. Now, it would be easier on me just to get one of my nurses who never complain and send them down there.
Correct.
But she does this on purpose because she knows if she gives whoever's given her the assignment attitude, that that's what they're going to do, just so they don't have to deal with her. And they know that. People know that when they give you attitude. But see, I'm not going for that okey doke. I don't really care if you don't like the assignment or not, because I'm not there to people please. I have to worry about my clients.
True.
I have to worry about their safety and what's going to happen with them, because that comes over how the nurse feels. And sometimes nurses don't get that. You know, they think just because they have a license, they can do anything or say anything. And once you let them know that that's not going to fly with you, that this is a safety issue that everybody has to contribute, they'll start to respect you more. As long as you fairly rotate it and you stay with the same consistent management style all the time. Because once you allow somebody to push your buttons and change you up, then they're going to do it on a consistent basis. And then knowledgeable, okay? And I talk about this a lot. I have a shirt that says, and I've told you guys this before, if my job is to know your job or tell you how to do your job, shouldn't I at least know how to do your job? Because I know we all have managers that go out on the floor and they couldn't any better flush a G tube or check for placement than the man on the moon, right? But they're monitoring you doing it. But if you did something wrong, they wouldn't even know you did something wrong because they don't know how to do it. They don't know policy and procedure, and they don't know their booty from a hole in the ground. And you'll go to some places where they'll have like director of nurses, they're a director of nursing, and they're not a nurse. You know, back in the old days, you could you could get a title like that and not be a nurse. You could be over nursing, but not be a nurse. And I find that difficult, that someone could be over me and really not have knowledge of my base or my scope of practice or my license. And then politically aware, okay? Because politics evolve around everything. So there's a lot of ways politics can affect you in the workplace. Everything from the way your facility runs to the way it's staffed to who gets certain titles. And then also politics involve things like lobbying for patient rights, lobbying for staffing ratios for nurses. So there's a lot of things like certain politicians can help with that. Like if you feel like you work in a hospital and the acuity of patients should be a 3-to-1 ratio for nurses, but all the hospitals are staffing the nurses at 5-to-1 ratio, then you might want to, as a lobbyist, go in and appeal for these changes to be made in nursing so that they'll change the ratios. And that all comes through the Joint Commission. They can change those ratios if enough nurses lobby for it. And what they typically go to is, what do the studies show? Analytically, does it show that there's a decline in the quality of care that the patients receive when we staff 5 patients to 1 nurse as opposed to 3? So they look at all that. Is the following statement true or false? It's increasingly difficult for the nurse manager to be both a clinical and managerial expert.
True.
Okay, I would say it's true for you to be an expert at both, but I also feel like they both go to hand in hand together. If you become a good nurse, a good clinical nurse, you're going to learn how to manage time. And so as a manager, you also have those same concepts, really. So I feel like they could be dynamically interchanged if you're paying attention to what you're doing.
Right.
But definitely difficult to achieve both levels.
Yeah.
So as a leader, you make a commitment to excellence, meaning that you're not settling for second best. Okay. Oh, I dropped that catheter on the floor. I don't have time to go get another one. Just pop it in. Okay. That's not what you're teaching your people. You got to teach them to do things the right way. And if you want people to do things the right way, how do you get them? What's the best way to get people to do things the right way?
You lead by example.
You lead by example. You make that commitment to excellence. You're going to be a problem solver, and you know you're going to be one, because what do you do when you don't know something on the floor?
You ask somebody.
You ask somebody, right? You don't just assume, because if you assume and you make the wrong move, then you're going to be in trouble. But you're going to go to your charge nurse and you're going to ask them, and they're going to give you ways to solve that issue, or they're supposed to. Now, some charge nurses don't. Why?
They want to feel that they're the head person and they know everything probably.
A couple of reasons. Okay. Sometimes charge nurses won't help you because they feel threatened by the LPN, right? Which you should never feel. Your LPNs can empower you and make you an important shining light on the whole dynamic, because they're the ones that see the patient every day. They're the ones interacting with the patient every day. They're your eyes and ears, and you should want them to learn to the greatest of their capacity, because that's only going to enhance your team as a leader. When you start to feel threatened, then there's no reason for you to feel threatened, because it's two entirely different capacities. If anything, they're more likely to phase out the PN over the RN and make the RN, who's now getting paid more money, who now has to have this higher level of education. And now they're going to make you responsible not only for having that higher level of education, but also for doing these skills that other people used to do or did do, because they're trying to do what? Cut costs. Okay.
Yeah.
Whenever you're dealing with management, they're always about the bottom dollar. That's what they're always about. Now, they will sometimes compromise patient safety for that bottom dollar. And that's why we have, as the nurse, have to step in, and we have to advocate not only for patient safety, but for safe patient nurse staffing ratio levels, and also like products and stuff that you're buying. Okay, so one of the things that I'll do at my facility is, let's say a company's trying to sell us a new cream, and their pitch always is on it, oh, it gives the same effectiveness, but it's cheaper. Because that's the bottom line they always want to throw at you. It's cheaper. And I always say to them, I don't care if it's cheaper or not. Is it going to do the job? Because if it doesn't do the job, it doesn't matter if I pay $10 million for it or $1 for it, right? If it's not doing the job. So the best way to know if it's doing a job is to let the nurses experiment with it. So I'll say, hey, give me some samples. I'll let the nurses try it. And if the nurses like it, then I'll buy it. Maybe. If the nurses say it's a better product and you can give it to me dollar for dollar or close to dollar for dollar, then of course I'm going to use it, because I want a better product for my clients. I want them to heal better and quicker, right? And if I have a product that's, let's say it's 50 cents a tube cheaper, does that matter? It sure does, because I'm buying 1,000 of these tubes a week. So if you take 50 cents times 1,000, that's a lot of money I'm saving, right?
Yeah.
But you already know, like when you buy the dollar store mac and cheese versus the the Velveeta one, the cheese quality is not the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you might like it and it might be okay, and you might even like it better, but the cheese quality is not the same. And if you want to make it equivalent, then you're going to have to add more milk, more butter, more salt, other stuff to make it equivalent to this other cheese, right? So
True.
same thing with the cream. If I'm putting the cream on, I might have to put it on 3 times as much. So am I really saving money? And that's what you have to look at. What is that bottom line? Then commitment and passion for your work, okay? And I feel very strongly about this. If you are at a stonewall in nursing, you're not passionate, you're burnt out, you don't like it, you're angry every day, get out. Because you don't belong in the business. Okay? These people need people that are passionate. And you have to be as passionate from day one. 20 years from now, you still have to be as passionate because that's what your patient deserves. Someone who's going to be passionate, someone who's going to advocate for them, someone who's going to get the right thing for them. Because without them, you don't have a business anyway. You have no business. Patients are our business. If we don't have patients, we have nothing. That's job security when your patient needs something. And when they come into the hospital, they're sick. Okay? We don't put people in the hospital these days if they're not sick, right?
True.
And we don't even keep them in the hospital when they're really sick.
Mhm.
They keep them just long enough to stabilize them, and then what? You're out.
Out.
Sometimes you go and you see these patients in the home, or you receive them back at the nursing home, and you're thinking to yourself, how in the world did they discharge this patient like this? Right?
Yes.
But you already know it's the insurance company. They're not going to pay unless a certain thing is going on. So you always have to have this commitment to these patients because you don't know how or what is going to happen with them once they get in your care. And they deserve to get everything from you. They don't deserve for you to come in there and be mean and nasty to them because you had a bad day. It's the same thing like when I go into a restaurant and my server is having a bad day, I'll give them an extra $10. Why? Because they're having a bad day. Somebody else probably shorted them or did something to them. Maybe you can make a difference in that person's day instead of continuing them down that same road of misery that they're already going. Misery is bad company. Anybody miserable in my life got to go. Trustworthy and integrity. So what does that really mean? Well, you can't build any bond with your patient if you don't have trust. Okay. Now, let's say you got to walk into a room and have a conversation with a man that's 70 years old that's having a problem with erectile dysfunction. You think he's going to want to talk to you about that?
No.
Or he might even be more willing to talk to you about it than somebody who's 24. Right?
Yes.
Somebody who's 24 is going to be really embarrassed, but the guy that's 70, he might just make jokes about it. Right? But the guy that's 24, he wouldn't want to tell you, a 20-year-old nurse, that he can't get an erection, right?
Yes.
Because he's going to have a hard time talking about that. So you have to be able to build trust with your patients, or else they might not come forthright with everything that's going on with them. Especially when it comes to things like substance abuse, erectile dysfunction, hard to talk about subjects. Okay. And then why integrity?
How it makes them feel.
Why integrity?
So they can grow trust in you.
So integrity, because there's going to be times when you're working alone, right? Now,
Yeah.
because I'm working alone, right, and I'm in the office and nobody sees me and I'm pulling the patient's pills and I drop one on the floor, so what? I could just throw it back in the cup. Nobody saw me. I'm addicted. So, my patient's supposed to get a pain medication and I throw a Tylenol in the cup and I take the narcotic instead. I'm putting a urinary catheter in and I'm short today and I'm really running behind and I drop the catheter on the floor. So instead of going and getting a new one, I just throw it in. It won't hurt. Okay, so there's always still somebody watching, even if nobody's watching. Just remember that. And can you live with yourself if you cause that patient to get an infection or something to happen that ultimately could take them out? Because sometimes people can't fight little infections because they're compromised in some way or another. And a real nurse, when you're a real nurse and you really have this trustworthiness and this integrity and this passion, there's going to be nights you're going to go home and you're going to lie in bed and you're going to be like, oh my God, Mr. Simpson asked me for a glass of water. Did I go and get it? Or I was supposed to do this and I forgot. Oh my God. And it's going to lay you in bed and you're going to worry about it. Or you're going to send a patient to the hospital and you're finding yourself texting the nurse from the next shift to find out what their status is. Like what happened to them? How did they end up? Because you're still worried about that patient, because it doesn't just leave you because you went home. Respectfulness. So this really boils down to, one, the way you approach and talk to people, and the way you present yourself to make yourself approachable. Um, it says that I respect your culture, I respect who you are as a person, and even if I don't agree with what you're doing, I can still give you the same respect, and I can still treat you as a human being. Go ahead. Um, so some ways of disrespectfulness for some people is if you're my superior and I looked in your eyes, that could be considered disrespectful by some cultures. So you have to be culturally competent in order to understand this. So some things you might want to take a look at if you're taking care of a patient from another culture is, you might just want to go pick up a book or something, or go jump on the computer real quick and take a look and just find out some things about them, because otherwise you might do the wrong thing. Like you might walk up to a Jewish man and shake his hand, and now you've offended him and the whole family, and they don't want you to care for them. Right? Because as a female, you're not permitted to shake a Jewish man's hand if he's a true Orthodox Jew and he follows those bylines. So little things that you do, you could put a cup of milk on somebody's plate that's eating meat for lunch and offend them. Why? Certain things you can't have on the plate together in certain cultures because it's not considered kosher, right?
Yeah.
Okay, accessibility and approachability, these kind of go hand in hand. So you don't want people to feel like you're not accessible, that they shouldn't come to you and talk to you, or that you don't have time for them. Um, so, those are all things that you want to think about, um, and be about when you become a supervisor. And then empathy and caring. There's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Okay, with sympathy, people typically cross over the line and get a little too close. And with empathy, um, you put yourself in their shoes, but you don't cross over the line. Like, how when you're talking to somebody and they're telling you that they lost their baby, if you're empathetic, you're saying things to them to make them understand that you understand their loss and what they're feeling, but you wouldn't say to them, "Oh, I understand. I lost my baby also." You wouldn't make it about you. You have to keep it about the patient. So patients don't want to really hear about things that happen to you. And a lot of nurses do this. They'll, just like I do when I'm telling you guys a story, sometimes I'll go into my own personal experience to explain it to you. But patients don't always want to hear about your personal experience. That's really crossing over the line, and now you're not being as empathetic as what you could be. And then you have a responsibility to enhance the personal growth of all staff. So you may delegate your staff to do certain things, like join policy and procedure committees, to grow, because this is going to enhance their personal growth. All right. So things that they can do to improve their skills. So when you're meeting and you're doing your employee evaluations, you're asking them about strengths and weaknesses, and how you can improve this person, and things that they could also do. So one of the ways that nurses, improve their strength and weaknesses is through doing different sort of training, like CEUs and stuff like that. So, we're looking at different ways to improve our knowledge base to grow. And other things we might do are take certain courses, like courses that enhance our skills. So all these things can make your staff grow. And then, of course, we're always doing like in servicing and training and everything along that line to try to improve our staff's ability. And then we evaluate them when they do skills on the floor, and we teach them things, and we teach them new skills. So, like, right now is PPD season or influenza season at my job. So LPNs that haven't given PPDs and who haven't given injections, I want them out there doing these. And I want the RNs watching them so that, they can become competent. The RNs are kind of dumb because they don't want to do it because it's too much work. But how are you dumb by not doing it? Hello? Why would it be smart to teach your LPNs how to do a PPD or how to do an injection?
Because it will be less work for you to do.
Yeah. I mean, now I got 26 flu shots. If I can make them do them all, then I don't have to do them. Which it's not the point of doing it so that you could get out of work, but you may have something more important to do that they can't do, that you need to handle, but now you've got to do both because and I'm saying you were too dumb to empower your LPN to do this.
And you're doing a division of labor.
Yes. You should be able to, when we talk about self-knowledge, we talk about knowing your own strengths. What kind of strengths and weaknesses do you have? Because that helps you determine what you're capable of doing and where you need to improve so that you can be more efficient as a boss, more efficient as an employee. So, what kind of things can you improve on? How do you accomplish your work? Is it done in a timely fashion? Are you detailed oriented? Do you get the job done the first time? Do you have to keep going back? Do you know what you're doing when you're out there?
Try.
And as a leader, you're always going to be learning. You're always working on this. You're always trying to improve your skills. What are your values? Okay. Because if you don't have strong professional values, then you may not be employing certain standards out there on the floor. And you want these standards. I mean, my nurses will say to me, Miss Sue, we know when you come around, we know to be at attention. We know to be on our game. And we like it. We like it when you come around because you're teaching us professionality and how to be a better nurse. Other people don't even come out of their office. They don't even talk to us sometimes. And they don't look at what we're doing as nurses. And people don't like it when you do that. They want to
Excuse me, Miss
know.
Loesch.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had to switch out because I was trying to ask a question, but was something wrong with my mic. So I just wanted to go back real quick when you were speaking about like the giving out the flu shots and the PPD, and making sure that the LPNs are equipped in doing that particular task. But I guess I'm just a little bit confused because when I was in the facility, it wasn't typically like the RN that I was working with giving out or delegating what needed to be done. It was typically the manager. So are you speaking in a managerial position to delegate to the LPNs?
Well, I don't know. Everywhere I work at, it's RNs that delegate to the LPNs, not a manager. Like, I mean, where I work at, we have a nursing supervisor. Then we have RNs that are charge nurses and they're over the units. And then the LPNs run the units. So the RNs are responsible for delegating certain tasks to the PNs. The RNs are also responsible for, like, if I have flu shots that have to be given in a unit, it's really the RN's responsibility to make sure the flu shots are done. There's no rule that says she has to do them or that the LPN has to do them, but they have to get done.
Yeah, I guess where I was at, it wasn't really like that. It was just like the supervisor would do it because I was still just working along the side. Like the RN had a cart doing
Uh-huh.
whatever, but I guess they would, the RN supervisor would just delegate to whomever that needed to be done because we still, I don't know if you want to say kind of like working as a team, but it wasn't just like the individual RN that was, working the cart or on the carts were delegating to the L's.
Well, see, what you'll see a lot of times is you'll have like a charge nurse that's on the unit. Okay. And she'll have the LPN doing everything. Or she might have two LPNs. They'll be doing everything. And what's the charge nurse typically doing? Sitting at a desk. They're not pushing a cart. Now, in some
Oh, yeah, that's
facilities,
true.
you might see it based on call outs and staffing acuity and stuff like that. But, a lot of facilities, you're not going to see that. The RN is sitting at a desk while the LPNs are out there busting booty.
True.
Okay. And so,
That's what they
what
do.
you're trying to instill in them is that all three of you should be out there busting booty so that all three of you can sit down at the same time. That's teamwork.
Right.
That's
That's
a real.
teamwork.
That would be nice.
Okay. Well,
Oh.
that's how you should be as a leader.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a division, like you said. It shouldn't be a division. It should be we're here
A
together.
teamwork. Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
When you work hand in hand, teamwork together all the time, then when codes and stuff run, players just naturally fall into place for those codes. People don't understand this. They're too concerned about being a boss. Okay. You'll be a more effective boss if you work alongside and instill confidence and build trusting bonds with your people and work together with them as a team as opposed to trying to be a boss over them. You want to be a leader for them, not a boss over them. A leader will get more cooperation out of people.
Some like to be a
Right.
boss instead of leaders.
Well, that's because a couple of things. Their authoritative type of style, they feel like they get more out of people that way.
That's true.
But you don't always. But sometimes you do. And you have to know, like, there's not always one style to be as a boss all the time. Like me, I'm more of a democratic type of boss, right? So I will allow people to contribute their ideas and work together as a team. However, there are times when people like to show their butt because you're allowing them that democratic process. So by allowing them that freedom, sometimes they'll take advantage of that freedom. And so then you have to go into an autocratic role model. Like the person I said that had the attitude, and I had to actually put them in check about their attitude. Like, first of all, you're not going to be making those faces at me, and you're not coming at me with that kind of attitude because I expect you to be a team player. And if you're working on the floor with somebody, I expect you to help that somebody, and I expect you to do it without attitude.
I've been trying to figure out my supervisor because I think she just a little bit of everything. Like, I think she laissez faire. I think she could be Democrat. I think she could be, I don't know. It's just real, I don't know. It's
And that's
crazy.
really flexibility, unless she's bipolar, which most of us probably are. Right?
Well, I listen, I don't
I think it's a qualification for being a nurse.
listen, I don't know because it's just, ugh. But also being, working under somebody like that could also um enable what you need to do as your job. Because if you're not sure on what need to be done, then you want to ask and give questions, then you want to micromanage. It's just like that can also put you in a certain situation as well too.
Well, see, as a boss, you have to know your employees. So I have certain employees that I operate laissez-faire with. Why? Because they're autonomous. And I know that one, they have some of these qualities that we talked about. Like they can do their own problem solving. They have a commitment to excellence. I know that they're passionate about the care that they're providing. I know when they go out there that they're going to do the best that they can do with what they have to work with at the time. And they're not going to call me with a million questions because they're going to try to figure it out as they go along. So when they do call me, it's going to be something important. So I know I can be laissez-faire with those kind of people, but I also have other people that I have to be autocratic with. I have to sit there and say to them, I need you to do this step. Now I need you to do this step. Now I need you to do this step. So you may not have just one sort of leadership style that you use with people. You may use a multitude of leadership styles based on the employees that you have, what you need to get done at the time, what type of time and budget constraints are there, what sort of flexibility do you have. So all those are going to play a part into how you're going to manage each situation. You can't just
Mhm.
say, oh, I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to be an autocratic leader and that's it. And whatever I tell people to do, they're going to do it. And if they don't, I'm going to fire them. You can't even use that strategy at my job because I work for a job that has union nurses. So really, those union nurses can really talk to me any way they want. And if I tell them to do something and they don't do it, there's not really a whole lot I could do about it at that moment.
Wow.
Now, eventually, I could probably write them up. I can take them over to the, you know, um, union hall. I can put them up on charges. Okay, but now once it goes to that point, if my superiors don't follow through with the actions that I requested, then it undermines me as a supervisor or as a person of authority. And this is typically what
Right.
they do in union jobs. It gets over there and they negotiate it down so that the nurse ends up getting a slap on the wrist. So then it makes me as a supervisor over time not even want to write people up because you go through the whole process and then it gets over there and they don't really do anything about it anyway. Now, when you work in the private sector, it's different. And if I have a per diem nurse, it's different. I had a per diem nurse that came in and I told the per diem nurse to do something and she didn't want to do it. And I'm like, listen, you're going to make me go hard school with you, which I don't like to do. But if I have to, I will. And she's like, well, obviously you don't know who I know. And I'm like, well, who do you know? Because I'm one of the top executives there. So I want to know who you know.
Right.
So, like, she's sleeping with my staffing coordinator, which he shouldn't be doing. Right.
Wow.
But he convinced her that he's the staffing coordinator. So she was dumb enough to fall for the okey doke that, hey, if you sleep with me, I could get you special considerations. No, he can't. He has no authority here. So you just made a fool out of yourself and him. Right? Because at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, bye. You're gone. You're done here. Don't come back. Because I can't even work with a person like that now. So, that goes back to integrity. Somebody must have two microphones on.
I think that's me. I'm trying to reconnect. Hold on.
I can hear myself reverbing in the background. Thank you. So, how you play yourself as a manager is going to, entail how a lot of things fall out. And again, one of those characteristics of being a good manager was being flexible. All right, so this is where your flexibility comes in. You have to maintain your integrity and you have to be consistent. When people come to my office and they want to tell me about a nurse, the first thing I'll do is say, hold up, and I'll bring the nurse in front of them. Why? Because I'm not going to sit there and let one employee talk about another employee without both employees being present. All right. And this is, again, part of good leadership skills because when you allow one person, because this is what they do, they try to play you or pit you against each other. And this is how they interrupt the process and interrupt and take focus off of other things that are going out on the floor. So, as a manager, you have to be smart enough to see this, smart enough to see the resistance, smart enough to see the pot stirs, because you got a lot of those pot stirs. And every day, they're going to try to keep that pot going. All right. So you're going to be doing all types of stuff that you never thought you'd be doing as a manager. You're going to have to listen to all their problems with their boyfriends, with their kids, with their job performance, with what's going on at school. Okay. And whether you care or not, you're going to have to act like you care, because when you don't care and you don't provide that relationship for your employees, you're not building trust. You're not building a bond with them. And sooner or later, um, you don't really have the same type of interaction, or you can't really get them to be as productive if you don't have this type of bond with them, because you can't make them happy. You can't make everybody happy. But what you want them to be is productive, responsible, and accountable for their actions. And people that come to work, that they do the right thing, and they don't do it because they're scared of you or because they're scared of getting in trouble, but they do the right thing because they value their job and they value what they're doing, and they want to do the right thing, and they also value you as a boss, so they want to impress and please you, and they want to make you proud. So those kind of things are going to make them a better and a more valuable employee for you. And then also sometimes what you'll get is, and you're going to see this a lot because you're going from LPN now to the RN, and how many of you are going to stay where you're at when you do that? How many of you plan on staying employed where you're at when you go from that PN position to the charge nurse position?
Well, mine is a little, I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna do with mine. Because I really would want to be more in the new role, more clinical, opposed to where right now I'm a school nurse. So I would like to, at least get some of my skills up and stuff like that.
Okay,
Before
so
if I
you want to
decide
go
to
to a
return.
med surge floor and you want to learn how to do things.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else?
Me too.
I mean, here's the thing that you're going to run into, and I see this a lot. Like, I see LPNs at work where I work at, and they go to school and they get their degree and they come back as the RN. Okay. And now, what are they going to get from some of those other LPNs?
Attitude.
And resistance. Okay. And, oh, I thought you were my friend. And this is how they're going to be treated. Oh, you think you're so much smarter than us now. You think you're better than us. And this is how people are going to treat them. Okay. And they're going to treat them that way for a variety of reasons. Okay. One, they're going to try to use your friendship, okay, as a reason why they do or don't have to get in trouble. They're going to use the fact that you went to school and they haven't made a decision to do that to make you look like, oh, you think you're better than us now. It's just like if you come from a poor neighborhood and now you move to a middle class neighborhood. Oh, you're too good to live with us now? No, I'm just trying to better myself and my family. It has nothing to do with you. This is what I want for me. Oh, well, why can't you give me this, or why can't you give me that? Well, why can't you go and work for it like I did? Why have to give you what I earned or what I sacrificed for? Why can't you go and sacrifice for it and get your own? But that's not how people look at it.
That's true.
All right. So it could be a little difficult of a transition because of that. Right. And I'll always say to people all the time, like, and I yell at my nurses and I yell at other people just the same, whether they're a friend of mine or not. If they're not doing the right thing, you're going to get a piece of my mouth. Okay. And people know I don't care if you're my friend or not, because what I say to them is, if you're really my friend, you won't put me in that situation.
That's true.
You'll do the right thing because you know you're my friend. And if you don't do the right thing and I don't force you to do the right thing, how am I going to force somebody else to do it? And I know you see this happening on the floor where certain LPNs or certain RNs get privilege over others. And it's privilege to assignments. It's privilege to time off. It's privilege to all sorts of things. Oh, you made this mistake and you're going to get fired. The other person made the same mistake and they're not even being written up for it. So that's not the kind of boss that you want to be. People can see it when you do it, and you want to be sure that you're not doing that. All right. So determine where you belong and how you can contribute it, and then assume responsibility for these relationships that I'm talking about. How are you going to handle those relationships? So we talked about the different types of leadership styles. Okay, autocratic, that's a directive type of style. So I make the decisions, you do what I say. All right, and a lot of times we use these in certain situations. So like I come in to the room, and I find somebody laying unconscious on the floor, and I call a code. Okay, now when you come in the room, I'm going to say to you, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, and you do this, and I'm staying with the patient because I never leave my patient. That's the first thing and the highest thing I teach everyone. Do not leave your patient unless the situation is so critical that you're the only one there. And if you don't go call for help, your patient's going to die. Then you try to do 2 good rounds of CPR on them if they have no pulse, no breath, and make that call as quick as you can and hope that they're still surviving. But you don't leave that patient unless you absolutely have to. Okay. Another rule in life. All right. And these are just a couple of little rules since we're talking about that one for that patient. We hardly ever restrict fluids or mobility, right? Unless it's life threatening. So that's one of those things that we never do is leave the patient unless it's life threatening and we don't have a choice. Democratic. So in here, it's a participative type of lifestyle. Is this going to work in the code? Oh, do you think we should go get the AED? How about, do you think we should get some IV fluids for the patient? Do you think we should get vital signs? And I'm going to give people time to make a decision, right? You can't use that in that situation because what's going to happen with your patient? Time is valuable, right? Laissez faire. When can I use that? This means I'm not giving anybody any direction. Figure it out for yourself. Do what you want. I don't care. So if I have autonomous people on the floor, like let's say from a doctor's office, and all my people in the facility working with me are advanced practitioners, okay, and they're all self-directed and autonomous. So I don't need to micromanage them or follow them around or make sure they're going to do the right thing. I can be laissez-faire in this situation because they're all going to make a move on their own. I know that they know what to do, they know how to manage their time, and they're doing it every day. So in this particular case, I don't have to worry about these people because they're doing everything on their own. Now, servant, when we talk about servant, that's about people that have this desire to serve, okay, and do good for the community. So, people that want to be a nun, people that want to be a pastor, okay, they have some people that go into nursing that they want to serve, they want to be self-servant. Okay. And so this is how they lead with this servant sort of attitude. Not sure if I had an example of that or not. Looking to see. So they believe that, these set of practices or the philosophies that they have will help in life or enriching the lives of other people, or it'll help make for a better organization, or the world will just be overall more caring if they participate and help and they use these philosophies of a better lifestyle. Quantum, they look at it as change is constant, it's going to be ever present. Um, they go long past the traditional modes of like the autocratic, the democratic, um, and they believe that change is going to continue to influence work and the workforce. And then transactional, these are this is a type of leadership that helps create change, and it is where you as a leader are committed to not only the change that's occurring around you and the future change, but also to the personal and professional growth of yourself and others. And then transformational, this is where we work to inspire others. Okay, this type of leadership involves also change. commitment to the personal and professional growth of others. So we're helping other people change and transform because it's making them the best person. And that's really the kind of person that we want to be out there on the floor with. So for servant leaders, these key practices occur. So they think about developing a vision. So they're going to analyze what's going on with the situation at the moment. And they're going to develop some sort of vision in order to improve what's going on. They're listening and learning and paying attention to what others are saying before they speak or act. They can envision the future and envision things that need to change. And they're able to see great qualities about other people and invest in those qualities and make those qualities work um, to help them achieve their goals. So they use that greatness in others to help their plan work and to help their vision get achieved. Um, they give their power to other people, so they try to install their power into other people, and they help to build the community by developing different strategic reactions. So the type of leadership that describes a nurse who assumes control over the group. So if I take control, if I'm in charge, if I'm the mom or the dad of the group, you can think about it like this, right? Because your mom or dad don't give you a choice, right? They just tell you this is how you're going to do it. And when you ask why, what do they say?
Autocratic.
Autocratic. They say because I told you to, and that's the only reason I need, right?
Yes.
So autocratic is the mom or dad type of leadership. If you think about it like that, okay. Democratic, you think about it as a democracy, laissez-faire. You think about it as I don't give two craps. You can have control. I don't want to be in charge.
Correct.
All right. And then transformational, which is really using that charismatic leadership to pull people in and try to make them be the dynamic person that you are and that you want them to be.
Yeah.
So the nurse manager, okay, has a few jobs. We need to plan things, organize things. We're responsible for staffing. We're directing different tasks and different people, and we're controlling. So part of the planning is, care planning for one. We're identifying problems. We're developing goals. What else? I mean, you have to plan for staffing. Okay, Saturday's coming up and Monday's a holiday. All right, so it's a 3-day weekend, right? So what's going to happen with your staffing?
Gonna be short.
Yeah,
Short
you're going
of
to be
help.
short, right? Because you're going to have staff that whose holiday it is to work, who are going to call out. Okay.
Yeah.
Other staff who are going to be off because it's their holiday to work. Other staff have a 3-day weekend, so they're going to call out and say, "Oh, it's 3 days. Let's just make it 4. Hey, I'll call out 2 days. Let's just make it 5. I need a week off." Okay. Organizing, that's about time management. So you're managing and you're using these resources that you have, and the resources are going to help you meet both your clinical and your financial objectives. Okay, so when you're organizing, some of the things that you're doing is like if you're the RN manager, you might have to look at how many supplies you're running for the month, and you might have your guy that's on your budget committee come in and say, "Listen, we need 600 piston syringes because the month is coming up and we're out of piston syringes and our supply order didn't come in, and we were supposed to get 600, but I just got a message from the vendor that they're on back order and we're not going to get them till December. So now what are you going to do? Because you can't use the piston syringes that you currently have on the floor. Why?
Because it's back ordered.
No, because they're only good for 24 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
How often do you use your piston syringes for your enteral patients? They're supposed to be
24.
changed every 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you guys do in the nursing home?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 24 hours.
So now how are you going to do that if you don't have them?
We use it for the other day.
Do what?
Use it for 48 hours.
Okay, well, what you're going to try to do is find somebody that has them, or you're going to start looking in all your hiding places to see if you
Or you
have
go
any
to another
stats.
floor. You go to another unit.
Yeah, you're going to go to another unit and see if you have some over there that you can borrow until yours come in. What's the problem with that?
That's a shortage.
Okay, what's a worse problem than that? Yeah,
It's not
it's a
gonna be-
shortage, but what's a worse problem than that?
To slow the job down.
No quality.
The problem with that is that when you buy the piston syringes or you get them shipped to you, or you get this feeding shipped to you, who pays for that?
Facility.
Yes.
Is it the facility? I mean, usually these patients have insurance, right?
Yeah.
What kind of insurance do they usually have?
Medicare.
Medicare.
Medicare or Medicaid, okay? So here's the problem with that. Let's say Medicare pays for so many setups a month, okay? I
Yeah.
can't take someone else's setup and use it on this patient. If Medicare finds out, I'll get charged with fraud. So
Yeah.
even if my patient, let's say my patient's supposed to get 20 cans of isosource a month, but they only sent me 16. I can't go to a patient and borrow their isosource because that's considered Medicare fraud. And if Medicare found out, they could shut my whole facility down and actually charge me with fraud.
True.
So I have to make sure as the manager, what? That I have enough stock on staff on hand that belongs to the facility, not to an individual, that belongs to the facility, that in case I run short, I can run for a couple days until I can get a supply from somewhere. That's all part of your job as the nurse manager. All right, so that's part of your organizational job, and that's part of your financial objective. Now, what's going to be another issue? Because now I'm going to have to buy these piston syringes from somebody else if my company can't give them to me. And I was probably already buying them from that company because why? That was the person giving me the best quality for the cheapest price, right?
Yes.
Now, if my company is out of piston syringes, chances are they're not the only ones. So now people are going to start gouging the prices. They're going to give me less quality of equipment, and I'm going to have to pay more money for it. So financially, it's going to put a burden on my budget. Just the way COVID is going to put a huge financial budget strain on everybody's budget, right? Because now we have to buy all this PPE and stuff, and a lot of it is being sold at exorbitant prices. All right, even like the droplet masks. Okay, half of the droplet masks, first of all, being sold out there aren't true droplet masks, but they're still charging the same price for them as if they were. Okay, and we have to keep oodles of this amount of stuff on supply. Why? Because I can't have people coming into the facility without a mask, right? It's my responsibility to make sure that the employees and that any client that needs a mask has one. So now I got to figure out how many masks do I need to have on site every month in order to meet that need. Another organizational planning thing that I have to do as a manager. So the list could go on and on for what your duties are. It's not just about, nursing anymore, because now you're a manager. You're also going to be hiring people. You'll be orienting them. And you may not be orienting them yourself, but you're going to be setting them up with people who are. And when you do that, set them up with these people, okay, how are you going to go about that? So you're going to be looking at your nurses. Who do I want this nurse to orient with? Because you got those nurses on the floor that you're not putting anybody with, right? Yes, no? Hello? I'm talking.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Or do you work with nurses that you would not want to orient other nurses?
Yes, yes, we do a lot.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Right, because you watch them, you see them work, and you're like,
Yes.
dang, don't put nobody with her.
Mhm.
Some said
you
it
keep
slows them
telling them,
down.
yeah, you keep telling them the same thing over and over again. Like, don't do this. You need to do this. And what do? The same old habits over and over again. Or they have such a nasty attitude, right? You can't
Correct.
get rid of them. You're stuck with them. But you're not going to put a new nurse with them, because if you put your new nurses with them, you won't have anybody sticking around. Because once they work with that nurse, they're going to be like, dang, I ain't never going back there again.
That's right.
Directing, so you're leading others to help achieve goals. Okay. And those goals have to be consistent with what the financial status of your facility is, goals that are consistent with the workforce, and goals that are consistent with the tasks that you would be requesting from them as a manager, or that you would be expecting from them as a staff member. And then you're controlling everything. So you're putting things in place that help control the environment, things in place that help control the staffing. So things that you could put in place that would help control would be like right now they put up plastic barriers, right, to control people being face to face. Other things that could help you control. Maybe you have an overtime list up for the weekend in case you're running short, so that you already have a plan in place to pick up additional people in case you're staffing short. So this way, as a manager, you're probably working Monday through Friday. You don't want to go home on Saturday and get 10,000 phone calls about, oh, you're short. What are we going to do? So you want to already have that plan in place of how your people are going to staff when you're not there. How are your people going to do this when you're not there? So you're controlling environmentally, you're controlling staffing, you're controlling a lot financially. Okay, you're controlling a lot of different things. Clinical quality.
Always come and pick us up from Mr. Ariam when you always take us from school. You buy donuts from us from that lady.
So then when we talk about different management type structures, we talk about centralized versus decentralized. So just centralized means that usually people within the group that are right there locally can make decisions without input from the group. So, sometimes you won't be part of the meeting, but your managers above you will. They'll make these decisions and they'll come back and tell you about these decisions, and then they want you to put them in place or make sure that everything's been done the way they want you to, but you didn't have any input. So what happens when this happens with managers a lot of times is they'll get the concepts from the people above them, and they'll say, hey, I want you to go put this policy in place, or I want you to go make sure that staff are doing this. And so you go down as the manager and you start, making sure the staff is doing this. And now staff start to ask questions, because that's what they do. When you tell staff to do something, especially if it's a change from policy and procedure, what are they going to ask you?
Standard procedure.
Why? Why we got to do this? Now, if you weren't part of the group and didn't have any input, what's your knowledge going to be about it? Very little, right?
Yeah.
But here's what here's what your boss is not going to want you to say. Oh, I don't know. This is what admin wants, so we're just going to do it. Because when you tell that to your employees, it's going to upset them. That is not something they want to hear. Oh, we're just doing it because they want it. Oh, every time they want something, we got to do it, because that's not going to sit good with them. So you have to have a way to tell your people about this change, why you're doing this change, and not use management as a reason why you're doing it. So you have to come up with reasonable reasons about why you would do this, about how it's going to either benefit them or benefit the patient for them to want to accept that change. In decentralized management, decisions are made through people who are knowledgeable about the issues being discussed. So if you were doing decentralized management, like for policy and procedure, and this is the way I do it at my facility. Yes, I'm the manager on the top, but I'm going to bring in nurses from every level. And when we discuss a policy, the policy would go out to them and they would review that policy and they would do research on that policy. And then they would also come up with solutions for how they would like to see that policy change and what type of things they would put in place to make it better. And then they all bring that back to the table. And now we all discuss it. And then can you mute, please? And then at the end of the day, we all had input. We're all knowledgeable about it. So when we bring it to the table, can you put on mute, please? So when we bring these issues to the table, we can actually talk about what the good part and what the bad part, like what the advantages, what the disadvantages, what the benefits are, because we're knowledgeable about it. We're working it, we're doing it every day. People that I call pencil pushers, right? They sit at the top and they make a decision about something that they don't even put their hands on. But it looks good on paper. So they make a decision about it. And then when you try to implement it, there's a lot of rocky road there because it doesn't fall in line with what else is happening. And that's because they don't know what else is happening. They just know what they read from a book or what looked good on paper somewhere. And so they tried to implement that. So magnet status is what every hospital should want to be. They don't really give the magnet status, I don't believe, to long-term care facilities, but they might, and I might not be aware of it. But what it really talks about is exceptionalness. So with this type of status, the reason why you would want to have a magnet status, the main reason is because number one, people do things in an exemplary type of way. Like they want it to be the best of the best, and it benefits not just the patients, but the employees that work there as well. And the reason why it does is because everything is geared towards a common goal. Everybody is working together. Everybody is part of the team. No one person is more powerful or more important than someone else. Um, People learn new knowledge here. They get innovated, meaning they're motivated. They come up with these creative ideas and they're able to improve patient care. Everybody is empowered and feeling strong, and the leadership is charismatic and it draws people in and it helps change those people for the better to make them stronger, more powerful team players. So you're going to have like the best of patient care you can based on evidence-based practice. It's a just environment, meaning everybody is equal, everybody is contributing. We're all on a level playing field here, and we all respect each other, and we're working dynamically, meaning we're working well together. We're intertwining with each other and bringing those skills together as a team. It helps to make better patient care, better nurses, and a better healthcare facility in all. So this will help us not only attract, but retain the best nurses out there. It will improve our patient care and give them shorter stays and less risks and complications. And it'll provide more satisfaction to the employees that work there. And the kind of style, the leadership style, will also build like a trust and a rewarding relationship among each other. Now, why is that magnet status important? Okay, that was one of your objectives. Okay, because it's going to attract and retain those top nurses. All right, nursing talents. What is nice nursing talents that you would want your nurses to have? What do you think that you would want your nurses to have to be a great team player?
Good communication skill,
Okay, what else?
problem solving,
Okay,
teamwork,
teamwork.
coordination,
knowledgeable.
Yeah, because they got to be able to go out and take care of those skills and do those things on the floor without having a million and one questions. And when
Yes.
you're a new nurse, you are going to have a million and one questions. And there's nothing wrong with that. But how many nurses do you work with that been a nurse for like, 11 years and they're asking you the most basic questions out there and you're like, did she really just ask me that? You don't say that out loud, but you're thinking that in your mind. I had a nurse that asked me. Now she worked on a unit, what we call a step down unit. So she works on a unit with all cardiac patients that are all, several of them are immobile, okay, and many of them are over 50, and they have cardiac conditions and other conditions. So we have immobility, we have cardiac conditions. You worked there for 17 years, and you want me to believe that you don't know how to put on a TED stocking? And you have little patience for that as a manager when someone comes out and says something like that to you. Oh, can you tell me how to put on a TED stocking? Like, I would even be embarrassed to even ask my manager that. And first of all, the TED stockings, the directions are right on the back of the package. One, and two, you could Google everything.
Oh, no.
But there is no time to Google.
Seriously.
They like to see anyway.
Here's
You're at work, you cannot Google, no time.
Listen, here's what they do. They come into your office, okay, boss? Boss, can I come and see you? I need to talk to you. Sure, come on up. Listen, I need to tell you that I don't have time to do my work on the floor. Now, they're going to stand there and tell you for a whole hour why they don't have time to do their work on the floor. You don't have time to do your work on the floor, but you got a whole hour to stand here and talk to me about it.
Right?
When I come on the floor, what do I see? Do I see you on the cart busting butt?
Nah, one in your mouth.
In the nursing station, on your cell phone, on the computer, talking to somebody in the hallway. How many nurses, like, now you guys work in long-term care. So if you're working in a facility you're not familiar with, or if you're floating, you're going to go in there and you're pretty much going to be working from the time you get on the floor until you're done, right?
Correct, yes.
Because you're floating and you don't know the patients, you don't know the medication treatments, you don't know any of that. But what about when you go and you work every day on the same unit? Are you dealing with that same thing?
No.
No. You go in, you do your meds, you're done in 30 minutes, you go study for 3 hours, then you come back out, you give the lunch meds, you go back in, you study another hour, you go back, do your charting, do your little rounds for the end of the day, and you're out. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, you know all about this.
I do know all about it. I know oh so well.
I can walk behind you.
But I don't care if that's what you're doing, if your work is done. If you know that when the patient comes and they need something, you're not mad because now you got to put the book down and go and do something for the patient.
True.
That's where I have a problem. I never have a problem with someone trying to improve their self, but don't do something stupid and come and talk to me like I was born at night. Yeah, but not last night. So if you try to tell me about something, I'm like a cop. I've heard that story already a million times. So you're not telling me something somebody else hasn't already told me a million times. Um, that's what you learn as a boss. When you've done this for long enough, and I've ran multitudes of business and worked with multitudes of employees. I supervise over 200 people every day. So I already know you can already see it coming when it's coming at you. and they're going to try everything because that's what people do. They try to push your buttons. Okay. You just have to be more professional and smarter than them. And I do a lot of cursing, not usually at them, usually in a corner somewhere. Okay. So, because you want this collaborative culture, and if you curse at them, you're not going to have it. Okay. Some people you can't even say to them, like, me myself, a lot of times what we'll say is, hey, put your big girl panties on, suck it up, and let's get it done. And what I'll say to employees, if you don't like your assignment, your responsibility is to take it, and then at the end of the day, grieve it. I don't care if you grieve against me. It doesn't hurt me. That don't bother me. If you don't like what I'm doing, then come and talk to me about it. Go talk to the union about it. You're not going to hurt my feelings by grieving it. What would hurt my feelings more is if you didn't follow the policy and the protocol to do that, and then it ended up not benefiting you. Because you want to empower. You have to empower your employees, and by not feeding into certain things, you'll actually empower them more. All right, so prompting change. All right, so there's going to be changes in the industry. For one, we see people living to an older age, right? You see people living to be 100, 107, 112. I don't know how old they're going to get, right? Some of them are older than Moses already. Why? Why are people living older?
Diets.
Well, we have a lot of new innovations in medication, right? And in illness treatment. So they can live longer with these illnesses, these chronic illnesses that generally used to take them out, right? Because we have better improvements in medication, technology, and how we're handling the patients overall. So, that allows them to live longer and to be older. Also, other things that are going to prompt changes is the role of government and industry in healthcare. Right now, government is extremely involved in healthcare, and that could be politically motivated. Some people believe it is. It should be increased for the protection of the people, but that's not really happening because the government doesn't really seem to care about the treatment of the people.
Now
They're
they care
more
because
interested in separating the people between who should get one treatment and who should get another by saying, oh, they don't belong here because they're immigrants, or, they have all these reasons when really we're all immigrants, right? Except for the Native Americans. They were the only ones that were here. The rest of us migrated here either through our parents or through our grandparents. The land belongs to one entity anyway. That's much higher than all of us. So who are we to say it's mine or it's yours and you can't walk on it? Who granted you that power? But yet they want to have that power and they want to have that control. And also, like, just with the let's talk about the power that it plays in healthcare. Okay, so I mean, how dumb does that look for you to stand up there and say, hey, I had access to this medication, so I was able to get better before anybody else, and I'm going to make it accessible to everybody else. We know that's not true. It's not going to be accessible to everybody else.
Preach,
The
Miss
cost,
Sue, preach.
okay?
Yep.
The cost, okay? That's not going to make it accessible. People can't get to where it is. And two, the pharmaceutical companies are going to make sure there's not enough for everybody else.
That's right.
Just like the toy people do every Christmas, right? Every kid in America wants that Chucky doll, but you only made 900 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is it so important for you to separate the people?
Mm-hmm.
Why, if you can make 900 of the dolls, you can make 4,900 of them.
Right.
But you do this so you can gouge the price, so you can have some sort of power over the people.
It's the devil in them.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. So, you also are going to see a rising cost in healthcare, and it's going to continue to rise. And COVID is only going to push that up more.
Oh, yes.
Now, I went to the about 3 months ago. I went to the ER, okay, because I had a sinus infection, and they gave me azithromycin, which I forgot that I couldn't take, and I took it, and it caused me to have colitis. All right, so I went to the ER, and I was there for 2 hours, and my bill was $42,000 for
Yeah.
2 hours.
Yes.
Like, what did you do for me in 2 hours? Like, first of all, I have a little problem with that, okay? Because I'm a nurse. You're charging $42,000. I can barely get $100 for that 2 hours of care that I'm providing as a nurse. And I'm doing the majority of the care. So you just charge somebody $42,000. $100 of that is going to go to me as the nurse. Where is the other $41,900 going?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think it should have been 42,000 for me and 100 for the hospital. But,
Exactly.
and then the changing patterns of healthcare delivery. So we have people getting older; they're requiring longer terms of treatment. We have a lot more technology, like with informatics. This could actually increase the cost of healthcare as well, because the way informatics work is informatics means that computers talk to one another. Okay, really, the military started with this idea of informatics back in the day, because they wanted to be able to like take their soldiers to Iraq, and when they were in Iraq, they wanted, if those soldiers came to the sick bay, they want to be able to open up the computer and see all the care that the soldier has gotten throughout the years, so that they have a good health history on the soldier, and then they can treat them accordingly and provide the best care. That was their intention. So hospitals saw this with the military, and they wanted to instill it, this informatics. So it would be, doing things like reducing medication errors by, if the physicians had a way, they could send this electronic prescription to the pharmacy as opposed to handwriting it. Because you already know with physicians' orders, when you go to read them, right? A lot of doctors, you cannot read their handwriting, even to this day. So when you're reading orders, a lot of times you're taking off a prescription and you're bringing it to the pharmacy. If you don't get it right and the pharmacy doesn't get it right, it could lead to a medication error for that patient. And who's going to end up with the error on their back? You as the nurse. Okay. So by them doing these, yeah, the doctor gets some, I guess, punishment for it. But when you work in the healthcare facility, I never see those doctors getting punished. What I see is the nurses getting stuff on their records.
True.
Okay. So, if they can electronically send this prescription over and take that part out of the nurse's hands, that helps a lot, because now we're not having to transcribe or figure out what that order says. And when we do get it, it's printed out in an electronic way. So it's not somebody's scribble scratch that we have to read. It's actually typed to print that we can actually decipher. Okay. Also, if, let's say I'm the nurse working on the floor and I have one of those rolling computers. Now, first of all, when you come into the hospital to be admitted, who also has one of those rolling computers? The receptionist, right? She's going to come to you, and
Yes.
she's going to get your name, your date of birth, your insurance information. Do you have any allergies? And when she puts all that in the system, hopefully it's going to bring any pre-existing records that you have. And that's important, because why? You might not be able to tell me everything that's going on with your health right now. If you're sick, first of all, your ability to concentrate, if you're having a UTI or back pain or a heart attack, is going to be decreased, right? If your O2 sats are low, or you're hypoglycemic, you're not going to be able to focus or concentrate. If you have Alzheimer's or dementia, you're not going to be able to tell me much about yourself. But if I can put your information into the computer, that might bring up some records and stuff from the past. But if the computers aren't merged together, or not reading each other's information, then it's going to bring very limited information. So informatics, what they did was invested in these new computer systems that are merged together and that read together. Some of them cost, millions of dollars, these systems, but it decreased risk factors for the patient. It made us so we could do one, electronic health records, which help one, preserve our patients' records and keep the information confident. Two, it helps us to decrease the med errors by getting these electronic prescriptions. Three, we can do real-time active charting on the patients, and then when the patient leaves the hospital and comes back, we still have that information. Plus, if we're merged into other systems, like if you go now to Virtua, right? If you go to a Virtua physician's office, and then you go in the hospital of Virtua, all that information is informatics. That's all going to pull into the system now. So everything that your physician did for you at that office is now going to merge in so that they can actually see, because you might not be able to physically tell them, and they're not going to be able to call every single doctor to get this information about the patient. And when you do send for records about a patient to a physician's office, when do you typically see those records coming across? 5 minutes from now?
No.
No. Sometimes
discharge.
2, 3 days, 4
3
days
days, 4
later,
days.
or the patient's already gone and you're just now getting the records, right?
Yes.
So, why informatics is so important in healthcare, and how it can help like decrease disparities. It can decrease, risks for things occurring like polypharmacy and someone getting medicated with something they're allergic to, or us missing the fact that the patient is pregnant. Okay, that's a big concern, because what's one of the first things they do to women of childbearing ages when they come into the ER for anything? A pregnancy test, right?
Yes.
So there was a lady that went into the emergency room in Los Angeles, and she went in for a gunshot wound, and no one thought to do a pregnancy test on her. Okay, they overlooked it. It didn't get caught. It somehow their quality assurance didn't pick it up, and the baby ultimately died. And they could have saved the baby if they had known that she was pregnant, but she cognitively wasn't able to tell them that she was pregnant.
Wow.
They somehow missed doing the pregnancy test. And so, I'm sure that they're going to have a big liability lawsuit against them now,
Lawsuits. Yeah.
because when we think about quality, safety, educational network, or quality assurance in the hospital, these are some of the things that they look at. And they look at quality markers that each hospital should do. So, like, before the other day, we were talking about, like, when your patient comes in, there's 3 questions that you want to ask them. And those questions are related to falls, right? Because you want to find out any information that you can. So usually when people are coming through the ER, there's like quality markers that this ER should be doing for every patient that comes through the door. And so one of those things that we do for all women of childbearing ages, and they'll even ask people like my age, and I'm 60, so I'm almost 60. So they'll still ask me when I come into the ER if there's any chance I could be pregnant, right? They do that before they do the x-rays. They do that before they do certain testing, and they're going to run that pregnancy test on you if they feel like there's any chance. Conflict. Okay. So, when I interview people and I ask them things about how would you handle a situation if you were working with a coworker that was either had an opposite personality of yours, or that was really angry with you, how would you deal with that situation? And you're going to deal with that pretty muchly on a daily basis. And if you don't believe that, then just stand there and watch, your supervisor one day, watch the people that approach, and watch how people come in when they're coming into work for the day and they're getting their assignments. All right. Because some people walk in every day and they have what I call sassitude. That means you woke up miserable, you're angry, something. I don't know what it is. The world, um, maybe the fact that somebody's not being intimate with you, and maybe if you take that frown off your face, they might be, um,
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be. But every day they walk around with this messed up face, like the world owes them a living. You know those people, right? You work with them probably.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so as a manager, these are ways that you're going to deal with these people and this conflict. So you have to know these. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so avoiding, if you're avoiding the conflict, then that means you just ignored it basically. And it's
Yes.
probably going to go unresolved. And then later on, something's going to happen for it to blow up. So, like when my nurse giving me attitude, I told her about herself and then I was done with it. And she's like, "Don't yell at me." I said, "Don't make me yell at you because when you come at me with attitude, and I was talking to you in a respectful way until you brought the attitude, and that really made me angry." So there's no reason for it because you're a nurse. You're supposed to be a certain way. After that, the nurse started acting totally different. She lost the whole attitude, acted nice, even said please and thank you. So by me not avoiding it, it actually resolved that conflict. And even the next day when I went back in, I was like, dang, would she take some kind of pill last night? She's still being nice. So sometimes people need you to not avoid the situation and to actually resolve it. Um,
Yes.
Collaborating. So this is where you both work together to resolve the conflict and it's a win-win situation. So I felt like there was a little collaboration there. I told her how I felt. She told me back and I didn't get angry at her for telling me back. At that point, I just dropped it and I walked away because I didn't want it to continue into a shouting match or a point of anger. And so maybe that collaboration there actually resolved the issue, or at least for the moment. I'm sure by next week the attitude will be back again because it doesn't stay away for long. Competing. So this is when it's a win-lose situation. Okay. It leaves the person who loses frustrated, and the other person has a desire to get even. So you're going back and forth, and then one person will back down, and the other person basically wins. Compromising. This is where both parties relinquish something of equal value. So let's say um, the nurse comes in and um, two nurses come in actually. This happens a lot. Okay, two nurses come in and there's a tough assignment, and then there's another assignment that everybody always wants. So the tough assignment you give to the one nurse, and she starts complaining, acting like she's going to go home, and just causing a lot of drama. Okay, and the other nurse, never complains or never gives you any problem. So you ask them to take the assignment. And in exchange for them taking the assignment, you give them something else in return. Like maybe you give them preference on the next holiday coming up, which one they want off. Or you say to them, hey, I appreciate you taking that assignment for me the other day. So, out of Christmas, New Year's, or Thanksgiving, which one would you prefer off? So you're giving them something back for what they gave you. Cooperating and accommodate. I'm sorry. Um, Compromising was really relinquishing something of equal value, and cooperating was actually the one that I just described. I said it backwards. So cooperating is where you give them an IOU for the future. With compromising, you're giving each other something of equal value back and forth. So you do something for me, I do something for you of equal value. So maybe you pass my meds for me, but I go and
Do
check
your
all the
wounds.
G tubes for you because you don't like to do that.
I do your treatments.
Yeah, because you don't like to do that. All right, with cooperating, it would be what I just said, where you take this assignment now, and then later down the road, you want
Give it
one of those
Thanksgiving.
holidays off, and I give it to you off because you did something for me. That's cooperating, accommodating. And then smoothing is where you focus on an agreement rather than a disagreement. So you don't really resolve the conflict, but you figure out a way around the conflict and you do something else that both parties agree on. But they still haven't resolved the original disagreement. So that could be like when I say a nurse comes in and I give them an assignment, okay, and they
Mhm.
don't like the assignment, but they take it, and then later they go to the union office and they grieve it, which I would actually be okay with.
Yes.
And I would tell my employees all the time, like, if you don't like what I do, please go and grieve it. Here's the number, here's the paper. I want you to grieve it. Why? Because one, it gives them a venue to vent about
Yeah.
the assignment. Two, if they grieve it to the union's going
They
to
can.
tell them whether they're right or wrong. And if they're wrong, guess what? I'll be the first to admit to it and I'll fix it. It's rarely going to happen. Why? Because I know the union rules. I know what I can do and what I can't do. And I'm not going to violate the union rule. Why? Because there's no reason for me to. I don't need to. It's just going to cause me a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But people think that you violate the union rules, or that's what they'll use against you when they don't want to do something. So that's why I'll say you take the assignment now and grieve it later, because technically, if you don't take the assignment as a nurse, that's abandonment of assignment, and I can't charge you with it. Hi, baby. You're going to the party? Come give me a hug. Bye. Have fun. Hi, Mama. You're going to the party too? Come say hi to my class. Come say hi. Where's your sister? Say hi to the class. Say hi.
Hi.
These are my twins. Say bye. Go to the party.
Bye.
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 Love you too, baby. All right. So, I would want somebody as a supervisor to go and grieve it, because one, I want them to see that I'm trying to do things the right way. Because once they see that, then they'll have more trust. Sometimes people have to go through that in order to trust you. And they have to see that you're treating everybody fairly and equally. That will give you less conflict. A lot of times people have conflict because you're not the only supervisor, and you do things one way and another supervisor comes and undoes what you did, or causes an issue because they don't do things fairly and equitably for everybody else, and that is always going to cause problem. And if you avoid situations, then it gives everybody a feeling of powerlessness, like they don't feel like they have control over the situation. This is Lewis's theory of change. So, what this means is there's certain things that you have to do in order for change to occur. Okay. And you have to know these three stages. One is unfreezing, one is moving, and the other one is refreezing. So when we unfreeze, that means that we've simply recognized the need for a change.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be an example of unfreezing that's happening in the world today?
Like the COVID.
Okay, the COVID make us recognize a need for change, and what change do we need to address there is having PPE on hand, right? Because a lot of us did not have PPE on hand for COVID. Why? When we know this is something we preach to people all the time about. That's one of the number one things you learn in nursing school and in medicine, is how diseases are transmitted and how to prevent that transmission. Yet all these facilities in America did not have PPE on hand to accommodate their healthcare professionals, even though we know that that's a true dynamic. Why?
I think the resources.
Well, we didn't have it on hand because typically we haven't been using it, right?
Yes.
So we haven't been using it. It's been sitting in a closet somewhere. And what happens when it sits around and it's not in a room that's temperature sensitive? It deteriorates and it breaks down or it expires and we can't use it. So as budget managers, we had to cut things in the budget. We typically cut things we aren't using. PPE being one of them. Nobody was really using PPE that much because you were only using a little bit of it, you know, like if somebody had MRSA or somebody had VRE, you know, or was on contact isolation, you know, what, you're using it for a week or two until they're better, and then you're not using it anymore. And it's only a couple of people using it because not everybody's taking care of that patient. But now we have a need for change, right? Because now we have a pandemic. And what we saw is by not having that stuff readily available in the workforce, it put a lot of people at risk. And a lot of people ended up getting COVID in the healthcare facilities that shouldn't have. And really, it was unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
So now we have to recognize that a change is needed there. So in order to fix this, one, we're going to have a certain amount of PPE on file. Two, we're going to have to make sure we have respiratory plans in place because now the governor has ordered that for the state of New Jersey, that all long-term care have a respiratory plan in place. We're going to have to hire people, epidemiologists, to help us build these plans. And we're going to have to buy equipment to store this PPE so that it doesn't destroy, so that we can put it in a setting that is conducive to it not breaking down and not getting moisture or not getting dry rotted. And then we're going to have to put other environmental changes in place so that we don't put ourselves at risk for a situation like this again. So once we've decided that the change is needed or that we've recognized that change, then we're doing something called moving. All right, where we start to initiate the change after we put in a careful process of planning. All right, so we're going to come up with this plan of how we're going to make this change. So we'll sit down, we'll meet, okay, and we'll talk about it. Now, when you're getting ready to make changes, you have to let people know that this change is coming forthright. Because if you do it without letting them know, then you're going to hit a lot of resistance. And even when you let them know, you're still going to hit some resistance. Okay, a perfect example is for influenza. Okay, Governor Murphy passed a law in January. All healthcare workers must get an influenza injection. It doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter what the capacity is that you work in the nursing home. It doesn't matter if you're the chief, the cook, the nurse, the secretary. If you work there, they want you to have a flu shot. If you work there, they want you to have a mask on. Okay, so the laws are made, or the changes are made for everybody. So then we want to let people know in advance. So when Governor Murphy made that law, Human Services also came out with a law, and it says that all people working in developmental centers have to get a flu shot. So then I send my people out and I tell everybody on grounds, we in-service them all, not on the fact that they have to get a flu shot, but on why flu shots are important and what the benefits of getting inoculated are. So after we do that, now we go out and we start making them sign a policy that says that you understand that you're required by law to get a flu shot. So you're doing these steps, and you're doing the steps to try to decrease the amount of resistance that you're going to get through the change. You're preparing people for this change, so when you make the actual change, they're less resistant to it. And then refreezing. This is when the change becomes in effect or operational. So you as a nurse, okay, you can influence the way someone thinks and behaves in each stage of the change by preparing them for the change. So when you do this change, this plan changed, it has to be purposeful. It needs to be systematic, okay, and then it's going to be easier to actually implement that change. So what behavior is amenable to the change and what isn't? How does the group function as a unit? So some people in the group may favor the change and some may not. Some may resist it. Okay. Or the people in the group that you're talking to, are they ready for that change? Are they ready to accept it? Okay. And the pace of how that change goes have to be consistent with the group or the person's readiness to accept that change. And is it a major or minor change? Because that too can affect whether or not people are going to be ready to accept it and how ready they're going to be to accept it. Is it a temporary change or a permanent change? All right, so change itself it has to be dynamic. It's persistent and it's going to be challenging. So we have to be flexible, and this change can happen in any area. It can happen in the clinical area or in the managerial area. We have to be acceptable to and flexible to this change happening. And again, we have to prepare people for it. So, if the changes are major or minor, so you could have a bunch of small changes that might be easier to flow in than one huge, large change. Like getting people to make a giant change might not be that easy. But if you do the changes in small steps, then it might be easier to get it accomplished. Also, you have to support the staff during the change. Like if they're doing new things or if they're doing skills or tasks in a different way, you want to make sure that you're helping them build their confidence, that you're recognizing the fact that they're making these changes, and that you're patting them on the back and giving them praise for doing so. So change itself is an 8-step process. You have to recognize the symptoms that indicate that the change is needed, collect data, make sure that you identify what the problem is that needs to be solved, okay, so you're not all over the place. Sorry, lost my notes for a second. You're determining solutions or alternative solutions to the problem. You have to make a course of action from those possible alternatives. So, people always say I have an A plan, a B plan, and a C plan, right? Because when I start to do things, my course of action may take me in a different direction than what I anticipated, or my outcome might be different than what I anticipated. And so based on my outcome, I may have to plan or make a change around that plan, make an alternative in order for me to get the outcome that I need. I have to implement the course of action that's going to cause that change. And then I have to stabilize that change, make sure it sticks, and make sure people do the things that they're supposed to do. What kind of things cause resistance in people? So for one, when they started putting LPNs in certain areas, a lot of RNs got threatened because they thought the LPN was going to phase them out of work. And it's two different roles. So you shouldn't think or feel threatened by something because of a change, because it doesn't mean that things are going to change for you. It just means things may change for that dynamic, and it could or could not affect you. But sometimes it's going to affect you in a positive way. But when people feel like that change is going to affect them, then of course they're going to be resistant to it. So personal threats that they might feel, or maybe they feel a loss of self-esteem. So when could this happen? Maybe instead of giving them so much responsibility, maybe you're spreading the responsibility out. And so they might feel threatened about that. And maybe you're not spreading the responsibility out to threaten them or for that reason, but because you want them to have more time to be able to do something else that's more important. So you're trying to allow them that time by spreading out the responsibility. But they might think that that's directed directly at them. They might believe that a relationship they have with somebody will be disrupted. So if you put this change in place, I won't be able to work with Sally anymore. And I really like working with Sally. I might have to work with Julie now, and I don't like working with Julie. When people don't understand change, okay, they don't understand the reason for it, why you're doing it, or they don't like why you're doing it, they're going to be resistant. Care plans, for instance. People that don't believe that care plans are valuable or benefit the patient won't put the time into a care plan that they should, because they don't believe that the person is benefiting from it. So if you don't believe, you're not going to do it. Some people don't have the tolerance for change, and they may feel like they're in a state of equilibrium or they're unbalanced because of the change that's going on. It's causing them to feel unstable. Okay, and they might not be able to cope with it. Also, disagreements about the benefits. So maybe they don't feel that the change you're doing is going to benefit the patient more. Or maybe they're worried because maybe it will benefit the patient, but it makes their job harder. So they don't like that. And that's the other issue right there, is they fear that the change is going to cause them to have an increase in responsibilities or duties, and maybe they already feel overwhelmed or like they do more than enough, and they don't want that increase in responsibility or duties. So their resistance to the change. So ways to overcome that. First is explain the proposed change to people that are affected. So you go out, you in service, and you tell people about the change that you anticipate making. You list the advantages of the change. So how is this change going to benefit me as an employee or benefit the patient? Relate the change to the person's existing beliefs and values. So we kind of talked about this before, like if you're trying to teach a diabetic, okay, about changing their diet, they have to believe that that diet is going to bring some sort of value into their life, some sort of value to them that they like. You can't just say, oh, you're going to eat this food and it's going to make you healthier, because that's not going to be valuable to them. But if you said to them, and I use this a lot because, what you have to relate to is what's the biggest thing that affects someone overall? Well, intimacy is one of the biggest things that affects people, right? So if you tell somebody that when your blood sugars are running high and you take these medications, it's going to cause you dysfunction in that sexual environment, that will motivate them to change their diet before if I say to them, well, if you don't eat a healthy diet, it's going to affect your blood vessels and your kidneys eventually, and you might have a heart attack or a stroke, or eventually you might have diabetic retinopathy. And what are they going to say? I'll take my chances. But if you tell them they can't have sex next week because that diet is taking them to another place and that pill is going to cause this, they'll probably jump right on it, because if it has to affect something in their life that's valuable to them. And we talk to people about kidney function and cardiac function and their vessels. They don't really find a value in that, if you notice. So it has to be something that is in their part of activities of daily living. So if I told you you couldn't play baseball anymore, or you couldn't do something that you really love to do, that's going to have more of a chance of changing you than if I say, well, it's going to make your arteries occluded, or it's going to make your vessels weak. That kind of stuff doesn't really appeal to someone as a valuable reason to make change. List the advantages of the change and relate the change to the person's existing beliefs and values. Provide opportunities for open communication and feedback. So, if you were doing change in the facility, the best way to do this would be to bring the proposal, have a staffing meeting, and allow people to put their opinions in. Now, sometimes what you'll notice in staffing meetings, people don't like to talk about their opinion. Why? Why wouldn't somebody want to talk about their opinion at a staffing meeting?
They don't want to be marked.
They think it's
Okay.
against them.
All right. Or you might target them or fire them or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So sometimes you'll even call staff meetings because staff will be like, oh, we need to have a meeting about so and so. And you get them in the meeting, and what are they? Just like y'all are, quiet. They don't even talk. They
Quiet.
sit there and
No.
be quiet, right?
Yeah. They
All
want
right.
you to do the dirty job, the dirty talking.
Yeah, they want you to do the dirty job because they're tired and scared to say anything.
Yes.
So you want them to feel like they can talk without being criticized and talk without being put down and talk without it being punitive. So sometimes you have to do things like a box where they could put something in the box and they could do it anonymously. So, like one of the things that we used to have, we don't really use it anymore, but we used to have a box in the room where we had the meetings. And so when people would have, communication or they wanted to put something back, they could put it in that box anonymously and give that feedback without feeling like there was going to be some sort of punitive um, action because they made a suggestion or because they did something. Indicate how the change will be evaluated. So, how are we going to make sure that the change was implemented and that it is going in a direction that we want it to do and that it's achieving the outcome that we want it to achieve? So, we're going to have to evaluate those changes. So, we need to talk to staff about how we're going to evaluate it. All right. So maybe one of our changes is all of our nurses up until now have been listening to the feeding tube using auscultation methods. And we know that's phased out because it's not a valid way to tell us whether a tube is in place or not. So now what we've said to the nurse is before you do a feed tube, you have to one, check for residual, two, measure the amount of residual, three, measure that tube to see if there's any migration, and four, do an assessment on the patient to see if they're showing any signs and symptoms of migration. So if I were evaluating whether or not that change were done, one of the things I might do is watch medication passes on the nurses doing the enteral care to see if they're doing these things when they go in there to give medications or when they go in there to start a feeding. And then the change has to come gradually. Okay, I can't say by tomorrow I expect everybody to do this. Even when you're in servicing people, you have to give time, okay? Because you have staff in, staff out, staff that's going to have questions, and on top of that, it's going to be too overwhelming if you change a bunch of stuff at once or you make this big change at once. It's going to be too overwhelming with staff and it's not going to be effective. And then incentives for commitment to that change. Okay. And that's really going to depend on where you work at. Like I work for the state. So it's hard for me to give incentives to my employees because the state gives me what? Nada.
Ada.
Nada. So if I want my staff to have an incentive from me, that's coming from my pocketbook. But I
Yeah.
do it because I want my staff to know that I appreciate them. I want them to know that I'm there for them and that I fully support them. So, like,
You
if they're
bring
stuck there for 3 days because of a snowstorm and I'm stuck there too, I'm coming in there and I'm cooking them breakfast and I'm making sure that
Dunkin'
they,
Donuts and coffee.
no, I don't do Dunkin' Donuts, baby. I make homemade salmon patties and pancakes and sausage and all that
That's
stuff.
nice.
Grits, we make it from scratch. We don't do Dunkin' Donuts.
That's nice.
Okay, we come up in there and we actually physically cook and we invite you to breakfast and we sit down and we eat together.
Wow.
Okay, because this is how you treat your staff when you want change. When you want them, you have to do for them to get them to do for you. And it doesn't have to be a big monetarily thing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
like that is. If I do something like that, that's going to cost me $300 or $400 because there's a lot of nurses.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing on a hot summer day. Just throw 28 bottles of water in a cold cooler and go around and give somebody a cold bottle of water and ask them how their day was.
True.
And that will cost you $4 and your time. But you will get so much out of your staff for that $4 that I couldn't even tell you what you'll get out of that. Just because you took the time to go around and say, hey, I know it's hot. I know you're doing a great job. I appreciate it. And I'm here to support you if you need it. And that's really all staff want from you at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to establish goals and priorities for each day as you're putting this change into place. So, you're going to gradually roll it out. Maybe we'll get a couple of goals accomplished this week. Maybe next week we'll get a couple of other goals accomplished. Maybe we'll try to accomplish a goal and what'll happen is we'll run into some roadblocks because if you're rolling out new change, there's going to be some things that you didn't think about along the way that are going to happen that are going to impede that progress. So then you have to go back and evaluate your plan, look at your goal, make sure it's achievable. And so you're rolling it out like that, okay? And then you're looking at the terms of your ability to meet the needs of the patient. So you can't put unrealistic goals in there that are going to impede your ability to meet the patient needs. You have to have a timeline. You have to look at your success or failure in being able to manage time. So maybe you're changing the way you do trach care or you're changing the way you do G-tube care. Is it more efficient? Is it meeting the patient needs? Is it timely? Does it make sense? Is it benefiting everyone involved? Because if it doesn't, then it doesn't make sense to make the change. You don't want to make change just for the sake of making it. It has to be beneficial when you make it. And then you use these results to direct your next day's priority. So as you look at how things transpired out throughout the day or the week, what do I need to make change to? And how can I prioritize this or make this work a little better tomorrow? So time management is a big part of it. Okay. Um, when you go in now, you probably already do time management. So you have a way that when you go into work every day that you function. And it's kind of a routine, really, is what it is, right? You go in, like if I'm going into the nurse's station, the first thing I do is let someone know I'm in the building, right? And then I go and I check all my emergency equipment and make sure that that's running, that I have oxygen and all that. Because if somebody codes, I don't have time to go get that stuff. So I want to make sure that's on the floor because nurse dummy or nurse butthole, I should say, might have worked the night before me. Okay. And what do? They go in there, they use the oxygen, they use everything on the floor, and they don't what? Replace it, they don't put it back, or they don't make sure it's good for me for the next person coming in, and they don't even give me report and say, oh geez, Miss Sue, I had to use oxygen, but I didn't use it until 6:40 this morning. It was really late. I've been documenting since. I'm sorry I didn't get it replaced. I just want to let you know. At least give me the heads up that they used it. Some of them don't even do that, right? So you come into the floor, you didn't check your emergency equipment. And when do 911s happen?
When they weren't checked on.
In the middle of the
Middle of the night.
So usually they happen at the beginning or the end of the shift, right?
Yeah.
So you're just coming on. The nurse that just went off didn't put oxygen back, and now you have a 911 and you go to get oxygen and there's none there. It happens
Yes.
more often than we'd like to admit. So, you want to make sure that you're following this routine. So once I check all my emergency equipment and everything, now I go back, I look at what patients that I have, who's had a problem during the night, who I need to check on right away. Okay. So I'm looking at all that stuff, right? And then now that I've done all that and I've checked on those patients and everything, now I'm going to go ahead and pass my medications, right? Because I want to get that done and get that out of the way because that's time consuming. So after I do my medications, then I'm going to do my treatment. And now I'm going to go do my documentation because if I don't do that now, then something's going to happen throughout the shift. And I'm going to end up being here 2 hours documenting on my own time because my boss isn't going to pay me to stay late. So you have to have a system. You have to have everything managed, everything organized. When you become a boss, it's going to be the same thing. And you'll also be talking to your people about time management because they'll be complaining to you that they can't get this, that, or the other thing done. So what you're going to do is teach them how to manage time because here's the problem. They can't get it done in that time factor, but everybody else does. So that's what you have to look at. Now, if I give a nurse an assignment and only she can't get it done, then it's a problem with that nurse. But if I give a nurse an assignment and 2 or 3 or 4 nurses have a problem, then I know there's a problem with the assignment. Now, as a manager, also ways you'll be able to know if there's a problem with an assignment is what we call our super users. Okay. So when I have a super user, what I know about that person is I can send them anywhere. They can do any assignment, anytime, anywhere, any place, and they will never complain. So I'll send them down to evaluate the assignment for me. And they'll be able to tell me whether or not the assignment is hard. And I can trust in what they say. The difference. Because if you send some nurses, it don't matter what assignment. You can send them an assignment to one person to give meds, and it's one pill. And they're going to be like, oh, I can't do that. It's too hard. All right. Your timing increases the power that you have. Okay. Using the right timing with people. So, in other words, if I was going to talk to somebody about change and they were having a rough time right now or things weren't going good for them on the floor right now, I probably might not want to talk to them about that right now. Right?
Yeah.
Because they're not in a good mood. And if I'm introducing change to somebody who's already stressed out, they're not going to be able to handle it. It's going to put them over the top. People have to be able to cope with change. And so, timing is an important thing. The size of the nursing profession, okay, it's huge. All right, so that hugeness gives us a great power, more power than what we've ever had. And now people look at us in a different light because we're education and we're professional. So we have this education that before, in the Florence Nightingale days, it was just wealthy women who were moms going in and taking care of these patients, and they really didn't have a lot of education or a lot of evidence to support them. But now, as a nurse, you have to have a strong knowledge base. You have to be technologically savvy, right? There's a lot of equipment we have to know how to run. You have to have technical skills. You have to know how to do these different types of wound care and dressing changes. What kind of IV fluids you should be running solo. What you should be running piggyback. What values and labs should you be getting on patients before you administer or do certain things with them. So it's a lot of knowledge that you have to have. And then also, as nurses, how many of you recognize that for the last several years, we have been the profession that has gotten the award of integrity? We have a high degree of trust and credibility. And some people are trying to tear that down for us. A lot of new nurses are trying to tear that down for us because they don't act professional. They're not credible and they're not trustworthy. They steal medications from patients. They omit medications because they're lazy and they just don't want to give them. So they'll admit medications to certain um, populations like the elderly or the developmentally delayed or the psychiatric that can't speak for themselves. We have nurses, we've seen nurses in the last few years that have gone out and physically killed people on purpose. So that all affects our credibility plus the way people act. Um, there was a couple of nurses that got charged because they were making fun of patients and showing different things about patients on social media, and they were talking about patients on social media. So all that takes away from our credibility and our professionalism. I remember when I was learning at Deborah, my nurse mentor came in and she's talking to me about how many doctors that she banged there. Like, really? First of all, so discreditable to the nurse to even say something like that. Like, why would you talk to someone that you're mentoring or, about that? Like, I don't want to know about how many times you were in the club and who you were with. I'm trying to learn about nursing. And I don't have any respect for you as a mentor if you're talking to me about that. Because, first of all, you should have more respect for that than the people that you work with. And doctors and nurses really shouldn't cross those lines because of the power that you hold and your responsibilities and duties to the nurses and the patients. Now, that's not to say that if you go to work on the floor and you accidentally fall in love with a nurse or a doctor there and you develop some kind of relationship, that's a little bit different. But you don't want to be engaging in certain behaviors on the job. It's just not professional. There's plenty of people, if you want to go out and club, and you don't put that all over Facebook, because nurses, first of all, you can lose your nursing license for being, if they feel like you're abusing certain substances. And if you get a DUI, you can lose your nursing license. And people have access to the internet, so you want to be careful about what you post on there, because employers can see that. And if they look at you and feel like you're out in the club every night and you're engaging in dangerous behaviors and practices, they might not want to employ you. And people do look at Facebook, and they also look at your credit records to see how employable you are, because nursing is a position where you could take advantage of someone's situation. You do have access to people's social security numbers and other sensitive information that could potentially put a patient at risk for a nurse, going in and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And we've already seen that it can and it does happen. Um, you always want to work on increasing the knowledge base and improving the future and evidence-based practice for the patients and for other nurses. And then the clinical nurse leader role, that is about working collaboratively with the healthcare professional and the team. This is a nurse that has her master's degree, and so he or she is going to be working with the team to collaborate care, coordinate and oversee that care. And they're working as an administrator or a management role, but it's one of leadership for all settings. Okay, it's more of a clinical role. So yes, you still may do some management, but you wouldn't necessarily be administrative. When you're delegating, okay, you have to be considerate of the patient's condition. All right. Now, what kind of patients do we admit to the hospital? Stable or unstable?
Unstable.
Okay, so that's why, as on admission, you're doing the admission. All right, what kind of patients do we discharge from the hospital?
Stable.
We discharge stable patients, but we discharge stable patients that need what?
Maintenance, rehabilitation.
Well, they need discharge teaching and planning, right? Because we made that care plan and we made those long-term goals on it. Why? Remember, that problem is interfering with their activities of daily living, and we want them to continue towards that goal of resolving those problems that we've put into that care plan. So they're going to have to engage in now completing these tasks or these goals once they go home. So someone's going to have to teach that to them. Now, your PN can do standardized teaching, or they can reteach something that you've taught, but initial teaching has to be done by you. You have to think about the complexity or the acuity of the patient. So how complex is the activity? You could tell your UAP, hey, go get these vital signs for me on this patient, and I want you to tell me if their blood pressure is high, and that would be wrong. Why? Because you have to make a judgment call about the blood pressure, right? That would require that UAP to make a judgment call, to use logic and reasoning, and they can't do that. But what you can say is, go take that patient's blood pressure and let me know if the diastolic is over 90 or the systolic is over 120. You could say that. You would think about the potential for harm to the patient. So is there any potential for harm? What degree of problem solving does it require? So again, if you have to give clear, concise instructions. And does it require any creativity, any critical thinking? What's the level of interaction required with the patient? So am I just going there and letting the urine out of the Foley, or do I need to do some sort of Foley care like flushing it? Because if I have to flush it, then that's going to require a different level of care than if I'm just draining it and measuring what's coming out of it. What are the capabilities of the UAP? So one, what are the written bylaws at your facility for the UAP? What are they allowed to do versus not allowed to do? Two, what have you actually observed them doing? Do you know that they're capable of doing? Have they demonstrated back to you of doing? Okay, how competent are they? And three, am I giving something that's within their scope of practice that I should be giving them to do? Availability of professional staff. So if I have professional staff, is it one, financially, does it make sense for me to assign it to the professional staff or to the UAP? Why does that make a difference? Well, if I have an RN on the floor, okay, I'm not going to have that RN doing something that a UAP could do, because I might need that RN to be available for something else that's more important that the UAP can't do. So I want to make sure that I'm assigning my professional staff to do those professional tasks and allowing my UAP to do those tasks that the professional can't do, so that I'm conserving the tasks that only my professional staff can do for them. And I'm also giving them the time to accomplish that work, because I'm delegating appropriately to the other people to make sure that that happens. The American Nursing Association principles for delegating care include determining the scope of nursing practice. Is it within their scope? It defines and supervises the UAP involved in providing direct care nursing care. The RN is responsible and accountable for nursing practice. The RN supervises any assistants or any assistant providing direct care. The purpose of the UAP is to work in supportive role to the RN, but your license is still, they're working under your license. And so this is why you want to definitely have that malpractice insurance. Because let's say you have a UAP that comes on the floor. Bye, baby. And that UAP says to you, oh, I can put in Foley caths. I did that at my other job. Okay, what are you going to say?
Is it required by law?
Well, first of all, you know that a UAP cannot put a Foley cath in, right?
Yeah, no,
They cannot.
they cannot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So right away, you're going to tell them, unfortunately, here you can't do that. And I probably would give them something in writing that says that. Okay. Now, let's say 2 hours later, you walk in the room and you catch the person doing it, because you assigned it to an LPN to do it, who was busy helping Mr. John over there, And so the UAP said, oh, I could do that. I do it all the time. So the LPN's like, okay, go ahead, do that for me.
Hmm.
It could happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to make sure that they understand, all right, that they're there to in a supportive role, and you're going to delegate accordingly, and you want to make sure that they totally understand that. What are the qualifications and capabilities? So the only way you're going to know that is by evaluating them. Now, again, you're going to know who you can trust and who you can't trust. And you probably already know that because you probably already work with UAPs on the floor. And there's some that when you're working with them, you're like, oh man, today's going to be a nice day.
Yes.
And others, you're like, oh my God, not this one again. Because you're constantly trying to find her or him. Okay. When you do find them, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay. And they're just a pain in the bottom for you to work with. Okay. So, all these things are going to happen when you work with other people. So, also, how stable is the patient? Now, a patient with changing vital signs, stable or unstable?
Unstable.
Okay. How about a person whose blood sugar is dropping?
Still unstable.
How about a patient that has a diabetic wound, 3 centimeters by 4 centimeters on their left leg? That's been there for 6 weeks.
Stable.
Okay. So, knowing whether or not your patient is stable or not. Unstable patients, you're not delegating. How complex is the activity? What's the potential of harm? What is our outcome going to be? You always want to think about your outcome, even when you're doing nursing questions, because that's going to help you answer the question. If I do this, what's going to be the outcome? All right. And then what is the overall need or the overall context of the other patient needs? So if I have to go there and do a bunch of other things, then I might just do the care myself, because I'm not going to send the aide in and then I'm going to go in and then I'm going to send somebody else in and then somebody else. So if they have a lot of complexity to them, I might just do everything at once myself and assign the UAP to do other tasks where they can go and complete what needs to be done. Plus, I myself personally don't like to delegate a lot of tasks to other people because I really like to see the patient for myself. Ultimately, I'm responsible for that patient. And there was a patient that came to my center that was at another developmental center prior. They removed her from that center and put her in my center. And the reason being because she had a wound on her hand, and the hand was wrapped with an ACE wrap, and people were supposed to be doing circulation checks on the hand. Physicians were supposed to be doing it, and nurses were supposed to be doing it. Ultimately, no one was removing the ACE wrap and looking at the hand. When someone did finally remove the ACE wrap to look at the hand, the entire hand and the wrist and everything up to the elbow was necrotic, and the patient had to have the area amputated. Okay, now everybody was charged with neglect. The nurses, the physicians, PT, OT, they were all charged with neglect. But this is just how, things can happen when you allow someone too much authority that they shouldn't have, and when you delegate too much to other people. To me, when you put your eyes and your hands on the patient, you know what's going on with the patient. When you rely on somebody else's information, you don't know if what they're telling you is the truth, if they've perceived it the right way, or anything like that. But what you will know is that there's certain nurses, and when they tell you something, you can count on it. And there's other nurses that you're going to be like, no, I am physically going to look for myself because I already know I can't trust what this person says. All right. Mentorship. Okay. You want to be a good mentor. Mentoring means that you're guiding the person along the way. You're not doing things for them, but you're advising them the best way to do it. And you're letting them take responsibility and do it for themselves on their own. And you're just guiding them along the way. and showing them the proper steps and the best steps to take. Usually when you do preceptorship, this is when you shadow a nurse. So you're shadowing a nurse, and or they're actually working with you, okay, and they might be showing you how to do the steps. But usually you're shadowing the nurse, and so you're learning how to do things by that preceptorship. And then you shadow them for so many days, and then they actually have you do the hands-on work. And they watch you and they evaluate you. So for mentorship, you're working with someone who doesn't have as much experience for you, and you're showing them leadership responsibilities. For preceptorship, usually it's an experienced nurse, and it could be any employee. The employee doesn't have to necessarily be a new grad. It could be anybody that is just coming to work as, in a new job title or at a new place. Nursing organizations, you should belong to some nursing organizations. Participation in them allows you to develop and exhibit leadership, and then continuing education. You want to continue your education. You want to learn as much as you can. The more knowledge that you have, the more powerful you'll be as a nurse. All right, that's it for that slide. And I'm going to try, I guess, to record the other stuff
Okay.
if you guys are going to watch it.
Yeah, we